Alrighty folks, welcome back to the week 3 help. We still have numbers 28 and 29 to go over. So notice that both of these have the same instructions as our last problem. We need to evaluate the following expressions. Now remember that evaluating an expression just means that we need to take this mathematical expression, made up of numbers and other mathematical symbols, and we basically want to represent this as a single number value. We see here the answer that we should get is 152. So hopefully that's what happens when we take negative 40 minus 8 times a negative 2 to the third power, or cubed, times 3. Alright, so a couple quick reminders, guys. Remember that if two numbers are written right next to one another, like our 8 and our negative 2, notice that there's no operation in between the 8 and this left parentheses. Alright, that means that we should automatically assume that there is multiplication. That's the operation that is connecting this 8 and this negative 2. And then the other reminder is just about this small number 3. It kind of looks like it's floating above the negative 2. Alright, so we call these superscripts because they are written above the number. Alright, and these are powers or exponents. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this one first. We have negative 40 minus 8. So negative 40 minus 8 times a negative 2 cubed times 3. Okay, and what I did not do is write our acronym here for our order of operations. So we'll change the color there. Remember that this is PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or PEMDAS is another way some people say it. Alright, so this just helps us remember our order of operations. So if we take a look here, the very first operation that we need to take care of, remember parentheses does come first, but we cannot simplify the 3 in this parentheses, nor can we simplify the negative 2 inside of this parentheses. So we go ahead and we move on to our next operation here, which is our exponents. We do have an exponent here. We're taking negative 2, which is the base of our exponential, and we are raising it to the third power. Alright, that is the power or the exponent of our exponential. So that's what we need to take care of first. So let's go ahead and do that. So we still have our negative 40, and from that we need to subtract 8, and we're going to take negative 2 to the third, and I'm just going to write this in expanded form. So remember that taking something to a power, that power just tells you how many times you're going to multiply the base to itself. So in this case our base of negative 2 is to the third power, which is why we're going to take negative 2 and multiply it to itself once, twice, 3 times. And then don't forget we still would be multiplying this to 3. Okay, and just like last time, if you watched my past video, I always like to put an equal sign here, just so we know that what we see written in this first line is equal to what we see written in this second line. And I'll continue to do that from line to line. So this second line is equivalent to, now we still technically have not taken negative 2 to the third power. We just wrote it out in expanded form. So let's go ahead and let's multiply this all out now. So we have negative 40 times, negative 40 minus 8. And this 8 is being multiplied to negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. So let's go ahead and do these three multiplications at the same time, paying close attention to our signs here. So first off, negative 2 times negative 2. All right, well, 2 times 2, that's going to be a 4. Since you have a negative times a negative, that's always going to be a positive. So negative 2 times negative 2, that is a positive 4. So we can imagine that this here now is really just a positive 4. And now we're going to take a positive 4 times a negative 2 still. Positive 4 times a negative 2. So positive 4 times a negative 2, that is a negative 8. I want to switch this back to green. And we still have this times 3 at the end. Okay, so we have left negative 40 minus 8 times negative 8 times 3. Notice, guys, that this is very, very similar to our first line up here. Negative 40 minus 8 times a negative 2 cubed. Negative 2 cubed is negative 8, so times negative 8 times 3 times 3. Okay, so we are left with four numbers here: negative 40, negative 8, negative 8, and 3. And the operations that are connecting all of these numbers. So we have subtraction here, multiplication here, and multiplication here. Remember, if you do not see an operation, you assume that it's multiplication. So we need to take care of our multiplication next. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So we still have our negative 40. And from negative 40, we are going to subtract. So notice that I've written this subtraction sign. We are taking negative 40 minus a positive 8. Negative 40 minus, so we have a positive 8 times a negative 8. A positive times a negative, that will always be a negative. And 8 times 8, that is 64. So we should have a negative 64 here. And that still needs to be multiplied to 3. So that's still multiplication here between the negative 64 and the 3. So we can go ahead and do that. So what is negative 64 times 3? So we have 64. We want a negative 64 times 3. So that's a negative 192. This is equivalent to negative 40 minus, and we just saw that negative 64 times 3 is a negative 192. Okay, so a nice trick here, guys, that is good to look at is anytime that you are subtracting a negative number, and you may have seen this, or maybe you'll remember this from taking previous math classes, but subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding a positive. Okay, so you can basically change this subtraction of a negative to the addition of a positive. So what we are really left with then is negative 40 plus a positive 192. So we are left with a negative 40 plus 192. And we are left with 152. So this is equal to 152. We're running out of room here, but we made it work. Alright, and we'll double check. I'm pretty sure that's the answer we were looking for, and indeed it was 152. So guys, the big idea for these types of problems here is always to make sure we are following our order of operations. And if it helps you, I would just write down on a piece of paper PEMDAS, or just put it on a sticky note right next to your computer, just so you remember that this is a very strict set of rules that we have to follow anytime we are evaluating a mathematical expression. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get all the way through it, but we can at least start. So we have 3 times negative 18/3 minus 2 times a negative 2. And again, we are evaluating. So let's trash all of that stuff and write out 3 times negative 18/3. And what are we left with? 3 times negative 18/3 minus 2 times a negative 2. Minus 2 times a negative 2. Alright, so do not forget PEMDAS. Okay. So starting off with parentheses, notice here in our parentheses we have negative 2. You cannot simplify that any further. Over here in parentheses we have negative 18/3, negative 18/3. Now this parentheses we can simplify, and we should. We can take negative 18 and divide that by 3. Alright, so what we are left with then is 3 times. So negative 18 divided by 3. A negative divided by a positive, that's always going to be a negative. 18 divided by 3 is 6. And we still have minus 2 times a negative 2. So now our parentheses are completely simplified. We would move on to exponents next. Notice that we do not have any. And we move on to multiplication and division after that. So we do have some multiplication that we can take care of here in 2 locations actually. First we have this 3 times a negative 6. A positive times a negative is always a negative. 3 times 6, that is 18. Minus, we have a 2 times a negative 2. Once again, a positive times a negative is always a negative. 2 times 2 is 4. So we are left with negative 18 minus a negative 4. So just like last time, remember guys that subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. Right? So another way we can think about this is actually negative 18 plus a positive 4. Negative 18 plus a positive 4. So sometimes it's good to do this on your calculator just to make sure you're not making any mistakes. Negative 18 plus a positive 4. So we have 18, negative 18, plus a positive 4. That leaves us with negative 14 then for our answer. Alright, and we'll double check to make sure that's the answer we should have gotten and no mistakes were made. And we see here negative 14 is what we were looking for. Alright, so once again guys, always remember PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, PEMDAS, a very, very important thing to keep in mind as you are going through these problems. These little tricks here that I pointed out, the more and more we practice, the more and more you'll get used to them. I hope this helped out, guys. We'll see you next week for sure. If you have any other questions or would like me to make any other videos for you, I'd be happy to do it. Just let me know. Until next time.